My name is Betty Gutierrez. I'm 33 years old, and until the night everything broke, I thought I understood my place in my family. I wasn't the favorite, not the golden child, not the prodigal one who returned only on holidays. I was something much more convenient. I was the fixer, the helper, the one they could call at 2 a.m. without apology, the one who'd show up, carry the weight smooth, the cracks refill the spaces they emptied out. I thought it meant love. I thought it meant belonging. But that night proved I'd been wrong for a very long time. It was supposed to be a celebration, my dad's 60th birthday dinner. I picked the restaurant, made the reservation, paid the deposit, ordered the cake from his favorite bakery, and even put together a slideshow of old photos. None of it felt like work. It felt like duty, family duty. My mother always said, in a family, everyone plays their part. Betty. But somehow my part never seemed to end. We were halfway through dinner when it happened. The laughter was loud, the plates nearly empty, and the kids, my sister Hannah's 2 daughters, were shrieking under the table while Hannah pretended not to notice. Her husband Brandon leaned back in his chair with that effortless smugness he'd perfected over the years already on his 3rd whiskey. My mother was in high command mode, gesturing sharply at the waiter complaining about the cheese portion, and making sure everyone noticed that she was the one keeping the table in line. The bill arrived in its little leather folder, and like always, I reached for it. It was instinct at this point. My hand moved before I even thought. Paying wasn't generosity anymore. It was expectation carved into habit. And just as my card hovered above the check, my mother laughed a brittle little sound with edges sharp enough to cut skin. "Oh, Betty, please, don't be dramatic." She waved her hand like I was embarrassing her. "You're not the only adult at this table." I blinked, startled. I wasn't being dramatic, I was just doing what I always did. But she wasn't finished. Her expression shifted, hardening into something cold and evaluating. "Actually," she said, tapping her finger on the table with a rhythm that made my stomach tighten. "Now that you're in your 30s, maybe it's time you start really pulling your weight, helping with the bills, the mortgage, your father's health costs. Real grown-up responsibilities." I stared at her. "I already help," I began. She cut me off with a single gesture, and then she did something she'd never done before. She pointed at me. That sharp, accusatory mother point people joke about, except this one wasn't funny. "If you're not covering the bills, Betty," she said, voice loud enough that 2 tables turned to look, "then what are you even contributing to this family? Get out of this family if you're not going to be part of it." Silence swallowed the table whole. My dad stared at his plate. Hannah busied herself with wiping imaginary crumbs from her daughters' faces. Brandon let out a soft snort, the kind meant to humiliate, not amuse, and murmured, "Yeah, let's see how long you last without them." Nobody flinched. Nobody said, "That's too far." Nobody defended me. It wasn't the words that broke me. It was the collective agreement. The quiet shared belief that I'd finally been put in my place. Something inside me, something that had bent and bent for years, finally snapped. I stood. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't cuss anyone out or ask why they thought I owed them my entire life. I just picked up my jacket, slid my untouched credit card back into my wallet, and said quietly, "Okay." That one word felt heavier than everything I'd carried for them over the years. I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. I felt the cool night air hit my skin like a slap. My legs were trembling, but I kept going until I reached the parking lot, opened my car door with shaking hands, and pulled inside. I didn't start the engine. I didn't move at all. I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel, the soft glow from the dashboard illuminating the tears I refused to let fall. For the first time in years, the anger inside me didn't feel wild or frantic. It felt slow, heavy, cold, a glacier forming at the bottom of my chest. A vow, soft, silent, dangerous. They wanted to know how long I'd last without them. Fine, let's see how long they last without me. But even vows can feel fragile at first. When I drove home, my mind churned through every late-night call I'd answered, every babysitting emergency. I'd rushed to every checkout line I'd covered. When my mom forgot her wallet, every grocery run, every airport pickup, every holiday I hosted, because no one else had the space or the energy. Apparently none of it mattered. Back at my condo, I shut the door and leaned against it. The silence was heavy, suffocating. I slid down onto the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. Not to cry, I didn't have tears left, but to breathe. Everything inside me was shifting, unraveling, reweaving. A part of me felt like I was losing my family, but another part, a smaller, quieter part, whispered something I didn't expect. Or maybe You're finally getting yourself back. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the city lights flicker outside my window and let that quiet, rising clarity settle in my bones. I wasn't going back. Not to dinner, not to forced obligations, not to being the family band-aid. It would take time, it would hurt, but something undeniable had happened at that dinner table. They had revealed exactly what I meant to them, and soon they were going to learn what they meant to me. The morning after the birthday disaster felt strangely quiet, a kind of hollowed-out calm like the air, right after a storm, not peaceful exactly, but emptied. I woke up before my alarm, eyes gritty, throat tight, body heavy from a night with almost no sleep. My phone lit up before I even got out of bed. Family group chat 27, unread messages. I stared at the notification without opening it. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the immediate urge to check, respond, fix, explain. I turned my phone face down and let it buzz until it stopped. By noon, it started again. Hannah texted individually. "Hey, Mom said you left upset last night. Everything okay?" No apology. No mention of her husband laughing in my face. Just the implication that I was being emotional, dramatic, inconvenient. I deleted the message. The rest of the day, I moved through my condo like I was underwater, slow and numb. My place looked the same. Clean, organized, comfortable, but something in me felt different. A thread had been pulled loose inside me, and now it wouldn't stop unraveling. That evening, my mom called 3 times. Then she emailed me a link to a recipe for healing garlic soup. Then she texted, "You not answering is rude, Betty. We need to talk about last night." I locked my phone in a drawer. For years, I'd been the one who smoothed things over. First apologized, first drove to their house, first bought gifts, first showed up first. My entire family had grown comfortable watching me extend my hand. Now I kept my hands to myself, and the silence made them panic. But for me, it was strangely relieving. The next day, on a quiet impulse, I muted the group chat. Then my mother's number, then Hannah's, then Brandon's, then my dad's, from whom I knew I would hear nothing anyway. The world didn't end. My ceiling didn't collapse. Lightning didn't strike. No one came to bang on my door, demanding explanations. Just silence. At first, the quiet felt like a punishment. Then it felt like space. Then it felt like oxygen. By the end of the week, the habit of checking my phone every 10 minutes had faded. I ate dinner alone, something simple, pasta, vegetables, a glass of wine without any interruption about someone's late-night emergency. I watched a movie I'd been meaning to see for months. I slept early. Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done in ages. I booked a weekend trip. A small Airbnb on this coast. Just me. No timeline, no schedule, no errands. I packed a bag, drove 2 hours, and arrived to the sound of waves hitting the shore. The ocean smelled like freedom. I sat on the sand with my shoes off, wind blowing my hair around, thinking I should feel lonely. But I didn't. I just felt new. I turned off my phone completely and let the silence deepen. Every few minutes, the instinct to check in flared up, something my family had conditioned into me, but I ignored it. Eventually, the instinct faded too. It's strange how much life you can find when you stop living for everyone else. By Monday, the family's patience had evaporated. While I was working debugging a stubborn interface component for a client, my phone began buzzing again. I forced myself not to look, but curiosity eventually won, and I flipped it over. A voicemail from my mom, a text from Hannah, 2 missed calls from the house landline, something they used only when things were urgent. I played the voicemail from Hannah first. Her voice was tight, irritated. "Hey, just checking in. Mom says you're being weird. Can you pick up your phone? We're worried about you." Weird, not hurt. Not upset by what happened, not sorry. Just that I was making things complicated for them. I didn't reply. 2 days later, an email arrived from my mom. Subject line, household contributions. I felt my stomach twist before I even opened it. Inside was a spreadsheet, an actual spreadsheet, listing expected monthly contributions, including groceries, home repairs, family dinners, holiday expenses, emergency medical fund, and a final line at the bottom, total monthly contribution recommended, $1,850. Below it, her note read, "Since you're not helping physically at the moment, this feels like a fair way for you to show you care about this family." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so wildly delusionally detached from reality. I closed the email. I didn't reply. That evening, Hannah left me a voicemail. "Mom doesn't know how to talk to you when you're being stubborn. Just open the spreadsheet and stop being dramatic." Dramatic. There it was again. The word they always use to strip me of legitimacy, to make my emotions small and their entitlement big. I blocked her number. For a while, I thought they might calm down. That maybe, just maybe, they would remember how everything escalated and rethink the way they spoke to me. But delusion rarely takes a day off. Within a week, I heard through a mutual friend that Brandon had been telling people at his gym that I'd abandoned the family, that I cut them off financially, and that my dad was suffering because Betty won't help. I remember sitting down at my kitchen table, staring at nothing for a long time. I wasn't angry, not yet, just numb, just tired. And behind that exhaustion was a feeling I'd never allowed myself to have before. What if I didn't go back? What if I didn't play the role anymore? What if I never picked up their pieces again? It was terrifying, and it was liberating. 3 weeks after the restaurant incident on a Wednesday morning at 10:47 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from Hannah. Mom says you're being really selfish. We're having a family meeting this Sunday. Everyone's going. You should show up and explain yourself. A meeting. Like I was a child. Like I was an employee who'd broken a company policy. Like they were summoning me to answer for causing their discomfort. I stared at the message for a long time. Then slowly I felt anger rise, not loud, but sharp, precise. A needle, not a flame. Not a single person had apologized. Not my father, not Hannah, not Brandon. And my mother, the architect of the entire humiliation, hadn't even acknowledged what she said. But now they wanted an explanation. I didn't reply, but I showed up. Sunday afternoon, I pulled into my parents' driveway. Hannah's minivan was already there. Brandon's truck, too. I walked into the house, the same warm beige walls, the same family photos, the same scent of lemon cleaner, but it felt different, colder, smaller. They were all in the living room. No one moved. No one greeted me. No one smiled. My mother looked up like she'd been expecting a delivery. Betty, she said, flat and formal. Sit. I didn't. Can someone explain what exactly I'm doing here? I asked. My mother folded her hands. We're worried about you. I actually laughed. That was the beginning. The unraveling. The moment the roles stopped fitting. They didn't know it yet, but this meeting wasn't going to bring me back. It was going to push me further away than ever before. The family meeting left me drained but not confused. Not anymore. For the first time in my life, the fog was lifting. Their expectations, their guilt, their twisted version of family loyalty, all of it stood in front of me, naked and undeniable. When I left their house that day, I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just felt done. Like a door had closed inside me, and the lock clicked quietly behind it. The first week after the meeting was brutal, and I wish I could say I handled it gracefully. I didn't. There's nothing poetic about grief, especially grief for a family that's still alive. It's not loud. It's dull, slow, suffocating. I woke up each morning with a weight on my chest, not knowing how to start the day without some part of me bracing for someone else's needs. For years, my mornings had always begun with a message from Hannah, needing me to grab something for her kids from my mom, reminding me about a family obligation from my dad, asking for help with the newest device update. Now there was nothing, just silence, an unfamiliar, uncomfortable silence I didn't yet know how to fill. I missed them, not the way they treated me, but the idea of family, the illusion that we were something functional, loving, interconnected. Lies can be comforting until you finally see the cracks. I spiraled a little. Not in some dramatic way, no screaming into pillows or breaking dishes, just a slow unraveling. I overslept, skipped workouts, ate junk, let dishes pile up in the sink, zoned out during meetings, didn't answer texts from friends because I didn't have the emotional energy to explain what was happening. It wasn't sadness exactly, it was emptiness, a hollowing out. Like I'd shed a role I'd worn for decades, but underneath it, I wasn't sure who I was supposed to be. One night, after ignoring dinner and watching some trash reality show for hours, I got up to look for a charger cable. When I opened my junk drawer, a small photo slipped out and fluttered to the floor. A photo of me at 25, standing beside my old beat-up Corolla, the first car I bought entirely on my own. My hair was messy, my shirt wrinkled, the sun behind me too bright. But I was smiling. A real smile. A proud smile. That girl had dreams, boundaries, self-respect. She existed before I let my family wear me down with needs and guilt and just one more favor. I sat on the kitchen floor staring at that photo until my vision blurred, and something inside me shifted very quietly but firmly. I wanted her back, not the girl I used to be, but the version of me who still believed in her future. So I started rebuilding myself, slowly, deliberately, like stitching together something that had been ripped apart. The first thing I did was wake up early, Not because anyone needed me, but because I needed me. I made coffee and sat on my balcony listening to the city breathe. The morning light felt gentler than I remembered. I went back to the gym, meal prepped like I used to, cleaned my apartment until the air felt lighter. I forced myself to answer texts from friends I'd neglected. Not explanations, just small steps. Hey, long time. Want to grab coffee movie this weekend, thinking of you. Some reached back immediately. Some didn't. But the ones who stayed, I realized those were the people I'd been too busy to see while drowning in family obligations. With distance, I started remembering the parts of me that had been buried under years of being useful. I'd forgotten I liked cooking, forgotten I loved reading, forgotten how much I loved hiking, forgotten I had humor, forgotten I had a life. And then something happened that reminded me the world is bigger than the four walls of my parents' dysfunction. A recruiter messaged me on LinkedIn. At first, I thought it was spam, but she referenced my portfolio, specific projects I'd worked on, even commented on a tool I'd built years ago and forgotten to be proud of. She invited me to interview for a lead developer role at a mid-sized startup. My heart fluttered in my chest, not with fear, but something I hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. I took the interview, and the second, and the third. A week later, the offer came in. Full remote flexibility, higher salary, equity, creative control. The chance to lead a team, not just follow instructions. When I accepted the position, something clicked inside me. A door opened. The next big step was one I hadn't expected. I moved. Not just out of the condo, but away from the gravitational pull of my parents' house. Away from being a few minutes away whenever Hannah had a meltdown, or my mom suddenly needed a ride real quick, or Brandon wanted me to fix the Wi-Fi. I sold my place, packed only what I loved, tossed the rest. Donated things I once thought I'd need for guests who only came to take, not give. My new apartment was different. Tall windows, clean lines, a view of the skyline that made the city feel full of opportunity. The kind of place where you start a new version of your life. Nobody had a key except me. Nobody had a drawer. There were no leftover children's toys tucked in corners just in case. No old towels from my mom. No chipped mugs Hannah didn't want anymore. This space wasn't built to accommodate them. It was built to accommodate me. And the wildest thing, I didn't feel lonely. I started reconnecting with friends. Real friends. The kind you can laugh with for hours. The kind who ask how you are and actually listen. I joined a weekly trivia group, started cooking from new recipes, bought plants and didn't kill them a miracle, went hiking on weekends, started dating casually, carefully, letting connection grow on its own instead of rushing into being someone else's emotional caretaker. Every week, I felt a little more like myself. Every day, my breath felt a little easier. Every morning, my life felt a little more like mine. Months passed without a word from my family. And while the silence had once felt heavy, it now felt like freedom. But families like mine don't collapse quietly. They don't suddenly grow self-awareness. No, they wait. They plot. They stew. They rewrite the story until you are the villain. And when their world starts cracking, when the weight of their own dysfunction becomes too heavy to carry, they come knocking. And eventually they did. Not with an apology, not with accountability, not with change, but with a single carefully crafted sentence that would drag everything back to the surface. We need you. But this time I wasn't the same Betty. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to find out. It happened on a Thursday morning almost 3 months after I'd walked out of that restaurant. Life had begun to feel like mine again. I had routines, rituals, small joys woven into my days. My job challenged me in ways my old one never did. My new apartment felt like a sanctuary. I was dating someone slowly, tentatively, without the usual anxiety of having to fit my relationship around the demands of my family. Then at 9:12 a.m., while I was reviewing code with one of my junior devs, an email notification slid across my laptop screen. From Hannah, subject family emergency. Please read. My stomach dropped. Not out of fear, but out of recognition. This was the moment I'd been expecting. The moment every child who finally sets boundaries learns to anticipate. When the family realizes guilt alone won't pull you back, they escalate. I clicked the email. The first line was sugary concern. We haven't heard from you in a while, and Mom is really worried. The second line slipped into guilt. The girls miss their Aunt Betty so much. Then came the hook, the bait. Dad took a fall in the backyard and fractured his ankle. We're struggling to manage everything. I'm overwhelmed. Brandon is working extra shifts, and Mom's too emotional to handle things alone. My heart clenched. Not because they needed me, but because I suddenly understood exactly what this was. Not a reunion, not reconciliation, not remorse. This was the moment they'd been waiting for, a crisis they could weaponize. The email continued. We need help organizing appointments, groceries, bills, and Dad's care. It would really mean a lot if you could move back in temporarily just for a few weeks until things settle. There it was, the true request. Move back in, just for a few weeks. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading each line slowly the way you examine unfamiliar handwriting. Once upon a time, I would have dropped everything, taken time off work, driven to the house with groceries and paperwork already sorted. Let them fold me back into the same suffocating role I'd been trying to escape since childhood. But I wasn't that woman anymore, not after months of learning what it meant to breathe, what it meant to exist without being carved apart by everyone else's needs. I scrolled back to the top and reread the email. Not once did she say, "We're sorry. We were wrong. What happened at dinner was unacceptable. We shouldn't have treated you that way." Instead, the subtext was clear. The moment things got hard, they assumed I'd return to being their caretaker, no questions asked. My chest tightened, but not with pain, with clarity. For the first time, I wasn't drowning in their demands. I was watching from the shore. And from here, their panic didn't look like concern. It looked like desperation. They didn't want me. They wanted the version of me they'd built, the fixer, the crutch, the reliable daughter who always said yes. I scrolled to the end of the email. Please respond soon. This is serious. We need you. Don't ignore your family. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the ceiling, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I wasn't angry, not exactly. What I felt was something sharper, more precise. It was the sensation of seeing a trap for exactly what it was, and realizing I no longer had to step into it. I didn't reply that day. I didn't reply the next day either. Instead, I let the email sit in my inbox, like a test I had no intention of rushing through. I needed time not to forgive, not to forget, but to understand my own role in this pattern. I had spent years making myself essential to people who never once asked if I wanted to be. And now they were acting like I owed them my body, my time, my life. But the part that changed everything wasn't the fall or the injury or the request. It was what came next. Because silence from me was never something my family tolerated for long. On day 3, my mom sent this, "Betty, your father is injured. If you don't come, that's on your conscience." It was astonishing, really. The speed at which concern turned into accusation. How quickly love transformed into leverage. Then Hannah sent a voice message, 35 seconds of tight, frustrated breathing and clipped words. "Look, I don't understand why you're making things harder. We're all exhausted, and it's selfish for you to leave us hanging like this. This isn't about the past anymore. Dad needs you. That should matter." I listened to it twice, not to feel guilty, but to study it. Every single word confirmed what I already knew. In their eyes, my value came from what I could provide, not who I was. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. A week later, I finally opened my laptop and drafted a reply. Not emotional, not dramatic, just neutral. "Thanks for the update. I hope Dad is recovering well. I've been going through some of my own transitions and needed space, but I'm open to talking. Let me know if you'd like to schedule a time." I stared at the message a few minutes before hitting send. I knew exactly how they'd interpret it. As hope, as entry, as evidence that I might be slipping back into compliance. But for me, pressing send wasn't surrender. It was strategy. If they wanted a conversation, they could have one. If they wanted a meeting, they would get it. I'd spent months building myself back up, months untangling their narratives from my identity, months learning the difference between kindness and self-sacrifice. I wasn't walking into a reunion. I was walking into a reckoning, and I wasn't going to walk in powerless. Not this time. That night, sitting in my new living room, with the city lights spilling through the windows, an idea formed in my mind. Not dramatic, not vengeful, not petty, just deliberate. If they wanted to treat me like a resource, like a utility, like a silent asset, then I needed to understand exactly what they'd taken, what they'd expected, what they'd used without permission. And that meant gathering information, the kind of information my family would never volunteer on their own. I grabbed a notebook from my coffee table and opened a blank page. At the top, I wrote what they owe, what I gave, what they took. I didn't know it then, but that notebook would be the beginning of everything. The beginning of truth, the beginning of leverage, the beginning of the quiet, methodical plan that would change the trajectory of our family forever. Because love without respect isn't love, and forgiveness without accountability isn't healing. And I was done living in a world where I had to shrink myself just to keep the peace. The next step wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was preparation. And I was finally ready. The moment I pressed send on that email to Hannah, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace exactly, but clarity. A sense of direction. A knowing. They wanted a conversation. They would get one. But it would happen on my terms, not theirs. And to do that, I needed something I'd never had in my family before. Power. Not emotional leverage. Not guilt or obligation or passive-aggressive silence. Real power. Rooted in facts. Evidence. Truth. So I started digging. Not out of spite, though. God knows they had it coming. But because after years of being gaslit, dismissed, and rewritten into the villain of my own story, I needed proof. Not for them. For me. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that the years I'd spent bending over backwards weren't exaggerated memories. Proof that the patterns I'd been drowning in weren't just family quirks. If they wanted to accuse me of being selfish, dramatic, ungrateful, fine. But I'd make sure the record reflected exactly what they'd taken. The first step was small. I opened the notebook I'd started and began listing everything I could remember. Every call, every favor, every emergency, every dollar I'd sent, every chore I'd done, every time I'd dropped my own plans for them. At first it felt petty, childish, like I was making a list to win an argument. But the more I wrote, the more I realized something awful. The list wasn't petty, it was long, too long. Pages filled quickly, my handwriting getting sharper with each memory. 2019 drove mom to ER at 1 a.m. 2020 paid $600 for Hannah's car repair. 2020 stayed with the girls for 4 days during their renovations. 2021 covered dad's post-surgery meds. 2022 Brandon's temporary loan, $450. 2022 bought groceries for mom all month because she said she was stressed. 2023 helped Brandon apply for 2 jobs, wrote his resume. 2023 hosted Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas. I flipped the page, kept going and going. Hours passed. By the time I stopped, my hand was cramping and my heart was pounding. This wasn't a list. It was a ledger, a documented pattern of years spent bending myself into usefulness. And I wasn't even halfway done. The next step was bigger. I reached out to someone I hadn't seen in a while, Zoe, an old college friend who now worked as a social worker. She'd always had a knack for navigating complicated family dynamics, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. We met at a quiet coffee shop. She slid into the booth across from me, with her hair piled into a messy bun, and that knowing look she always had when she sensed trouble before a single word was spoken. "You look like someone who's about to blow up their life," she said, sipping her latte. I huffed a laugh. I think my life blew up months ago. Fair. Start talking. So I did. I told her everything. The dinner, the meeting, the emails, the spreadsheet, the silence. I kept it factual, unemotional, almost clinical. For the first time, I wasn't crying or justifying or softening the edges. I just told the truth. Zoe listened, jaw tightening, eyes narrowing. When I finished, she leaned back and exhaled. "Betty," she said slowly, "this isn't normal." "I know." "No," she insisted, it's not just unhealthy, it's exploitative. And from what you're describing, it might also be illegal." The word illegal felt heavy, almost absurd. Illegal how? She reached into her bag and pulled out her tablet. "Let's check something." 10 minutes later, her eyes widened. Bet you need to see this." She turned the screen toward me. There it was. A home equity line of credit. Opened 3 years ago, co-signed by my father. And me. Except I had never signed a thing. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. "That's not my signature," I whispered. Zoe tapped the screen. "I know, but the bank thinks it is." My stomach twisted. I felt cold. "Are you saying—" "Someone forged your name," she said. "Or added your name without your knowledge." My throat tightened, but the truth settled in easily. Too easily. Of course they had. In my family, consent was always optional. Convenience trumped boundaries. Love meant access. Responsibility meant obligation. "I'm liable if they default, aren't I?" I murmured. "Yep." I swallowed hard. "How much is it?" Zoe scrolled. Her eyebrows shot up. 68,000. I leaned back, pressing a hand over my mouth. A strange laugh bubbled up, sharp and humorless. $68,000. Signed using my name. Attached to my credit. My future. "Bet," Zoe said softly, "you need a lawyer." She wasn't wrong, but I needed something else first. I needed evidence. I needed receipts. I needed the truth organized and undeniable. The kind they couldn't argue with, reframe, or manipulate. And I needed it before I confronted them. Because this time I wouldn't walk into a family meeting like a wounded daughter. I'd walk in like a woman who finally knew her worth. A woman who had facts, power, and options. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a quiet investigator. I downloaded bank statements, printed years of transactions, highlighted payments, collected text messages, saved emails. When I finished, I had a 28-page breakdown, color-coded, labeled, organized. It was the most cathartic thing I'd done in years. Not to punish them, but to finally see the truth behind the fog. The next step was support. Not emotional support, not comfort. Witnesses. I reached out to 2 extended relatives, people who had watched my family from the edges. Not deeply involved, but observant. My Aunt Denise, my dad's cousin Rick. I invited them separately, met them privately, and laid everything out with the calmness of a woman who had nothing left to hide. I'm not asking for sides, I told them, just the truth. They both looked devastated as they read through the documents. Oh, honey, Denise whispered. I had no idea it was this bad. Rick shook his head. Your mom has been telling people you abandoned them. I knew it didn't sound right. They didn't offer excuses. They didn't try to defend my parents or Hannah. They didn't minimize what I'd been through. Instead, they wrote statements, simple, honest, documented. Not to attack my family, but to back me up should I need it. I left each meeting with a small weight lifted off my chest. Truth felt lighter than lies, accountability clearer than guilt. By the end of week 2, I was ready. I purchased a navy blue binder, filled it with the forged loan documents, my contributions report, screenshots of messages, emails, copies of the statements, notes from my lawyer. I also purchased a small digital recorder, legal in my state, and I slipped it into my jacket pocket, not out of malice, out of protection. Because walking into their house again meant stepping onto familiar ground, and familiar ground was where they'd always rob me of my voice. Not this time. Not anymore. When Hannah texted, Sunday dinner at Mom's, you're coming, right? I replied, I'll be there. But this wasn't a reunion. It was the beginning of consequences, and I was finally ready to deliver them. Sunday arrived with unsettling calm. The sky was overcast, the air heavy with that strange stillness before a storm. It felt fitting. For years, I'd walked into my parents' house like a soldier going into battle, unarmed, unprotected, hoping it wouldn't get too bad this time. Today, I wasn't walking in unarmed. Today, I carried truth, documented, printed, organized truth. And truth is a weapon my family had never expected me to wield. I pulled into the driveway and stared at the house. Same beige siding, same crack in the pavement, same gnome on the porch, a chipped ceramic relic of a childhood Mother's Day gift I barely remembered giving. Everything looked identical. But I wasn't the same woman who'd once lived here. I grabbed the navy blue binder, slipped the recorder into my jacket, and walked to the front door. Hannah opened it before I knocked. She was smiling too brightly. Betty. Oh my gosh, you look great. Come in, come in. I stepped inside. The smell of lemon cleaner and baked chicken wrapped around me like artificial warmth. The living room was exactly as I remembered. Heavy curtains, family photos, the same worn couch with the stitched throw blanket I'd bought for them 3 Christmases ago. Everyone was already seated. My mom at the head of the table, Brandon next to her avoiding eye contact. My dad propped on crutches, grimacing every few seconds as if pain earned him sympathy. The kids on the floor with tablets too engrossed to look up. No one moved to hug me. No one apologized. No one acknowledged the months of silence. They acted like I'd gone to the grocery store and returned an hour later. Sit, my mom said, gesturing at the chair closest to her. Like I was a dog. I didn't sit, not yet. Before dinner, I said calmly, there's something we need to address. My mom's lips tightened. Betty, we don't need drama tonight. Your sister cooked. I'm not here for drama, I replied. I'm here for clarity. I placed the navy blue binder on the table with a soft thud. The room shifted. Faces stiffened. The kids looked up, sensing tension like animals before an earthquake. What is that? Hannah asked, voice brittle. Receipts, I said. My mom scoffed. Receipts for what? This is ridiculous. For everything I've given this family for 7 years. Silence, heavy, suffocating silence. I opened the binder to the first page. Let's start simple, because I think somewhere along the line we got confused about who's been helping whom. I flipped pages slowly, deliberately. Rides, emergencies, groceries, babysitting, repairs, payments. Each page a ledger of what they'd demanded and what I'd sacrificed. My mother's face blanched. Hannah looked stunned. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. This isn't appropriate, my mom snapped. We're family. We don't measure love with money. I looked her dead in the eye. You measured my worth with money the night you told me to cover the bills or get out of this family. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I turned the page. And this, I continued, is the home equity line of credit, the one opened 3 years ago. My dad's head jerked up. Hannah's eyes widened. Brandon muttered, "Oh shit." I slid the printed bank documents closer to my mother. "I didn't sign this," I said. "And yet my name is on the loan. My credit tied to $68,000 of debt." My mother swallowed hard. "Betty, we needed. You forged my signature." "Now wait," Hannah sputtered. "No," I cut in. "I've already had a handwriting analyst compare signatures, and I spoke to an attorney. This isn't a hypothetical. It's fraud." My dad's voice trembled. "We didn't mean—" "Yes, I said you did. You meant exactly what you did. You planned it. You executed it. You hid it. You hoped I'd never find out, and if I did, you assumed I'd quietly fix it." My mom slammed her hand on the table. "You wouldn't dare go after your own family." I smiled. Small, steady, dangerous. "I already have." Her face drained of color. "I filed paperwork with the bank yesterday. My name has been removed from the loan due to fraudulent authorization. The account has been flagged. You can't use my identity again." Hannah finally exploded. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said softly. "I'm ending it." Brandon pushed back his chair and stood. "You think you're better than us? You think—" I think I interrupted that I'm done being your unpaid babysitter, your bank, your chauffeur, your tech support, your emotional punching bag. My father tried to speak, but for once I didn't let him. He had been silent for years, while I was torn apart piece by piece. Now it was my turn to speak. "Dad," I said quietly, "all I ever needed was for you to defend me. Once. Just once. But you stood by as Mom humiliated me. You sat silent while Hannah and Brandon mocked me. You let them weaponize my kindness." His lips trembled, but he didn't deny it. "And now," I continued, "now you want me to come back because you're hurt and overwhelmed. But not once did any of you consider what I needed." My mom's voice cracked. "Betty, please. We're family." "No, Mom. Family doesn't use you until you fall apart, then blame you for breaking." I pulled out the last page of the binder. A notarized letter, signed the day before. "I've withdrawn from the loan. I've frozen all accounts connected to my name. I've spoken to legal counsel, and I've informed the IRS about any past transactions listed as gifts that were actually repayments disguised to avoid taxes." "You wouldn't," my mom whispered. "You already bet against my boundaries once," I said. "You lost." Hannah burst into tears. Real or performative, I couldn't tell. Brandon looked like he wanted to punch a wall, but was smart enough not to. I stood. "I'm done." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. For once, I wasn't the smallest person in the room. I turned to each of them. "Hannah, I said your daughters are innocent. If they want to find me when they're older, they can. But I'm not your childcare solution anymore." She sobbed harder. "Brandon, I said, if you ever use my name again for anything, jobs, references, credit, I will go public with everything you've said about me, word for word. Or—" He paled. "And Mom," I finished, "I hope you find the help you need. But you will no longer find it in me." My mother whispered, "Betty, don't go." But I already was. I grabbed my binder, my coat, my bag, and I walked out of the house without looking back. For the second time and the last time. This time felt different. Not like escape, like liberation. When I pushed open the front door, the evening air felt crisp and clean, washing over me like a baptism. I stepped off the porch, past the cracked driveway, past the gnome, and I didn't stop until I reached my car. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just breathed. Deep, steady, alive. I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking toward myself. The fallout didn't come as a single explosion. It came in waves, quiet at first, then louder, then impossible to ignore. A week after I walked out of my parents' house for the last time, I received a letter from the bank. Confirmation of removal due to fraudulent authorization. Loan account, frozen pending further investigation. A single piece of mail that severed the last financial tether they'd wrapped around my life. I stared at the letter for a long moment. Not with triumph, not with gloating. With relief. A soft, exhaling relief that felt like unclenching a fist I hadn't known was tight for years. I snapped a photo and archived it. Proof of the truth. Proof of my freedom. I didn't send it to any of them. They'd find out soon enough. 2 weeks later, Aunt Denise called. She never called me unless something big was happening, good or bad. The moment I saw her name, I knew it wasn't good. I answered. Her voice was breathless, panicked. "Betty, they're losing the house." I sat down slowly. I figured that might happen. "It's worse than that," she whispered. "Your parents have been behind on payments for months. With the account frozen, they can't borrow more. They've been trying to refinance, but without your name, they don't qualify." I closed my eyes, not out of guilt, out of clarity. For years, I'd been the invisible pillar holding up a house I didn't even live in. The moment I stepped away, the structure collapsed. Denise hesitated, then added, "Your mom told people you blackmailed them, but no one's buying it. Everyone knows how much you've given." I exhaled. Let her say what she wants. I'm done defending myself. The truth had a longer lifespan than her lies. It always did. 3 weeks after that, the next domino fell. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Brandon had lost his job. His contract wasn't renewed. Apparently, one of my old contacts, someone I'd once referred him to, had heard a voicemail where he'd called me a mooching, manipulative deadweight and passed it along to his supervisor. Unprofessional conduct, the acquaintance said. Bad fit for the company culture. I didn't rejoice. I didn't smirk. Honestly, I felt nothing. You can't lose what you never respected. As the months passed, the silence between my family and me grew wider, deeper, heavier, but it no longer suffocated me. It protected me. I watched the seasons change from the windows of my new apartment light, spilling across hardwood floors I'd chosen myself. My life filled with people who wanted to be there, friends I'd reconnected with, coworkers who valued me, someone I was slowly, carefully allowing into my heart. My days unfolded without dread, without obligation, without that constant low hum of anxiety that came from waiting for the next crisis call. I woke early because I wanted to. I cooked because it brought me joy. I took walks after work just to feel the wind on my skin. I read at night without expecting a text asking me to drop everything. There was peace, a kind I'd never known before, a kind I didn't realize I deserved until I finally tasted it. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't lost. I was living. For the first time, I wasn't a background character in my own story. I was the author. The holidays came and went quietly. My mom sent a Christmas card, passive-aggressive hand, written a thinly veiled plea wrapped in barbed nostalgia. "Love from your real family," she wrote at the bottom. Real family. The phrase bounced around my mind for days. Not painfully, just lightly, like something foreign that no longer applied to me. I didn't respond. I didn't owe her the reaction she wanted, the guilt, the apology, the return to the role she'd carved for me. Absence is its own answer. Months passed. My career flourished. My social circle grew. My home finally felt like home. Then one evening, 6 months after the confrontation, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset bleed across the skyline. The air was warm, humming with the sounds of the city. A glass of wine in my hand, soft music playing from the living room. It struck me then. Not sadness, not regret, but an overwhelming gratitude for the life I'd built after stepping away from the wreckage of theirs. A life where I wasn't needed for survival, where I wasn't guilted into service, where I wasn't defined by what I gave. A life where I was enough simply by existing. And then the realization settled deep in my bones. I didn't burn the bridge. I stopped carrying the materials they needed to rebuild it on my back. They had used me because I allowed it. They had taken because I made myself available. They had drained me because I believed love meant giving until there was nothing left. But I'd learned something profound. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's ownership, control, dependency disguised as devotion. And once I understood that truth, I couldn't unsee it. I was free. Not because they let me go, but because I finally let myself go. I finished my wine, set the glass down, and looked out at my new world. A world I chose. A world I built. A world that had nothing to do with them. My past no longer owned me. My family no longer defined me. Their chaos no longer pulled me under. I wasn't the fixer anymore. I wasn't the crutch. I wasn't the daughter they expected to save them. I was just Betty whole-heeled and finally enough for myself.